Yeah, what do you mean by outcomes?
I think anytime you talk about teaching, and particularly teaching outcomes, right, you have to frame it in relationship. What is the course title?
In part, it's going to depend on the class.
Are you teaching digital rhetoric in a standalone course?
Right, and or what is its purpose in a particular curriculum?
Is it, in fact, a larger curriculum?
I've been doing a lot of program assessment lately, so I'm all about outcomes. It's really, for me, thinking about the learning goals of a specific course. And in a digital rhetoric course, that would be some issues of so broad, critical thinking.
To have students become critically aware of the media and the tools that they're using.
But critical thinking about the ways in which we compose and we produce.
And this is exactly right up with what makes a good pedagogy, is that students need to become better attuned to certain modes of new media and network communication.
What modes are we choosing? Why are we choosing those modes?
Thinking in terms of more conventional practices and seeing how they change when you append the adjective digital.
In terms of the outcomes, I think that what I hope for my students in digital rhetoric classes is that they start to glean some of those transformations.
I don't like to separate out digital rhetoric from any other compositional or rhetorical enterprise.
And understand the way that working in digital spaces and with digital methods changes their practice, changes the way that they think.
I think what makes digital rhetorics important in terms of pedagogy is when you're trying to accomplish something and something that's digital or technological becomes one of the ways that you can best achieve it. It's not somehow this ontologically distinct entity from all the other avenues of pursuing various forms of rhetorical work.
I always rely and go back to Stuart Selber's functional, critical, rhetorical literacies. But then also Toby Coley, he did a follow-up to that. He talks about the ethical dimension as well.
And I think I would layer into those a couple of learning outcomes about understanding the responsibilities methodologically of being a digital rhetorician and doing digital rhetoric. Where does an ethics of care come in? Is that required? I think it is, right?
And so a lot of my work intersects with talking about ethics with surveillance and privacy, but always about how to engage in those spaces, to critically think about those spaces, and then also become really like rhetorical users and producers within those spaces.
When I teach these classes, I'm thinking about having students analyze, produce, and understand.
I think a lot of times we ask students to analyze, which is, good. We need analytical skills, but we also need to be composing things.
I'm interested in students making things and not simply sort of analyzing text that exists.
And the majority of students we get, they want to make stuff. Like, they come to that major because they want to make websites, they want to make apps, they want to make videos, they want to make sound pieces. And they really don't want to sit down and read a book on rhetoric. They really don't want to sit down and read a book on cultural studies.
I think students that are English majors, that are rhetoric and writing majors, they need to know how to make videos. They need to know how to make websites and how to put together a multimodal package of their writing.
I'm often focused on getting students to reach a point of expertise, even though expertise can be a fluid criteria to hold, in a particular community of practice.
Having students use new digital technologies, and ideally they would be open to experimentation and exploring, and not being afraid of failure.
There's a very good chance that students are going to engage in some kind of juxtaposition practice, bringing together supposedly disparate items, which, as also McElroy told us, produces results that are startling and effective, meaning that the point of invention is when I think about things that don't seem to belong together in the same space, they often lead me to another kind of insight or path pattern formation. There's usually a lot of pattern formation, a lot of connectivity, meaning seeing how things connect and come together. So these are digital logics.
It's only through play, it's only through practice that you begin to get some sense of what this all means and what it can mean.
But I hope by the end of the course they can see how those things really inform each other, that they're not just we're never just making a text. It has impacts in the world and has impacts on them and their cultures and their communities in ways that go beyond, I made a cool animation.
And so that's one of my main goals when I teach digital composition is let's create a lot, let's compose, let's learn by doing it. And then we can do a little bit of analysis of our own work and analysis of other models, but also, do a lot of composition.
But if I could put a camera in the hand or an audio recorder in their hand, and I could encourage them to think not only about what they were producing, but how they were producing it, and use the concepts that they were learning about, I found that the learning outcomes were far greater. Those are the classrooms where students came back to me and said, wow, I was really happy to be in that class. Like, you turned learning around for me.
So I want them to, again, say, I am a maker of digital work. This is part of who I am. And for me, that's the most important outcome, because that's when the learning really becomes meaningful.
I think less about outcomes of teaching digital rhetoric than I think about indicators of learning. So I'll give you an example. My students right now are making a digital video in technical writing class. That process, from working on a script to doing some storyboarding, right, to putting some rough cuts together, layering some sound, going back and putting B-roll. I have all of that available to me as an instructor as evidence of where I need to intervene and where I need to hang back and just watch the learning happen.
In terms of learning outcomes, I think, again, it goes back to that like primary basic stuff, like understanding the digital, right? What is digital? How does it relate? Understanding the rhetorical theories and methods that we're working with.
I actually sort of go to a text that goes out of its way to say that it's not digital, which is Jody Shipka's Toward a Composition Made Whole, because I think her framework helps all of us think about what we're trying to teach and what we're trying to get out of students in the classroom. And what I like about Jody's argument is that the choice of medium is part of the rhetorical situation.
I often start with Bitzer, just as a sort of framework, and so I want them to understand purpose. I want them to understand what audience is and does, and how it can function as think about the reception of your text during its production, and especially constraints. For me, constraints and affordances are like two sides of the same coin.
I think what's really important for me when it comes to digital rhetoric is circulation. How do these texts actually get to audiences?
Regardless of the kind of medium, and regardless of which platform my students are working in, I invariably just start talking about audience, even though it can still be kind of a vexed, fragmented thing.
And so for me, when I ever teach a course, it's having them construct their own and then work within their own rhetorical situations, and thus creating texts for external audiences and completing that transaction process between that external audience and themselves as the rhetor of the text.
I think we absolutely, our understandings of audience change, but I think that kind of ancient rhetorical formula of composing a message to try, to the best of your intuitive kairotic abilities as a rhetor composer, to circulate now something or to create something to have an impact on a certain audience, I think that is something we can still talk about.
I'm trying to accomplish this communicative task. What's the best way to do that? What medium is the best way to do that? And how will that medium like shape, shift, sort of contort my message? How will it enable certain things, constrain other things? I think if that's the key thing I want students to leave the classroom with, is that just knowing that that's a choice that they have, and knowing enough about the basics of rhetoric to know that, okay, here are the available means in this particular medium, in this particular situation, and if I shift things over here to from sound to video, what changes about the situation, what changes about my argument?
If the end game is to prepare people to take positions in the academy, then that's one set of outcomes.
what I like to do in grad classes that are focused on digital rhetoric is offer students an opportunity to develop collaboratively some kind of original digital project. And an outcome for me is that the project explicitly connects to some conversation within the scholarship, within the field. You know, I think that even at this point, there are a good number of students when they're new to digital rhetoric, but even colleagues who, because it's just so fun to experiment with technology, they kind of play the role of the gadget lover, as McLuhan once called it. Like, they just get caught up in what's possible, and it's awesome, and I love it too, but what's the so what there?
I think one of the skills that, as an assistant director, I've tried to show the graduate students is that what they do online matters a great deal to their future careers.
And then, of course, how to manage their own digital footprint and not, post rants. And I do a lot of that with undergraduates, where we look at the fame and the fallout of just random people online who have had their lives changed because of something that they did.
I wish there was a clear way to say, this is what digital rhetoric is, here's how we design outcomes, and here's what we do. And if we do that, then we have a sort of institutionalized kind of dynamic, which is, to me, I think part of what makes digital rhetoric so much fun and so exciting is that it doesn't fit any of those molds, right? And it allows for that kind of amorphous quality, from teaching a class in an advanced technical communication to teaching a class in computer science, right? And thinking about what is the rhetoric of code, right? Or is your code aesthetically beautiful to you or to the machine, right? And that's an interesting question to ask. And how do you get to that? Well, it starts from a kind of classist design around that kind of outcome.